I was taking huge risks with not only my performance but with the entire performance, and I really recognised how foolish that was.
When we talk about the history of heavy metal, the name Black Sabbath always comes first. The band changed music forever, giving the world darker, heavier sounds that inspired generations. At the heart of this legendary band were four young men from Birmingham, England: Tony Iommi, Ozzy Osbourne, Geezer Butler, and Bill Ward. Each member brought something unique, but today we focus on the special and often complicated relationship between guitarist Tony Iommi and drummer Bill Ward. Their story is one of friendship, creativity, wild adventures, serious struggles, and finally, late-in-life honesty. For years, many fans wondered why Bill Ward was missing from major reunions, why his role seemed hidden, and what really happened between him and his bandmates. After decades of silence, Tony Iommi decided to share his side of the story, and what he revealed shocked many. His words take us deep into the highs and lows of being in one of the most famous rock bands in history. To understand it, we need to go back to the late 1960s, when everything began. In 1968, Birmingham was a tough place to grow up. Factories filled the air with smoke, and many young people worked long, tiring jobs. Music was an escape, and for Tony Iommi and Bill Ward, it was their lifeline. Tony, a gifted guitarist, had already faced tragedy when he lost the tips of two fingers in an accident at a factory. Most people would have given up, but Tony didn't. He found a way to keep playing by creating his own technique. His riffs became heavy, dark, and unlike anything people had heard before. Around the same time, Bill Ward was making a name for himself as a powerful drummer. He had energy, speed, and most of all, unpredictability. Together, Tony and Bill clicked right away. They were different in personality. Tony was quiet and disciplined, while Bill was impulsive and free-spirited. But in music, their differences became magic. The early days of Black Sabbath were full of experimentation. Bill's drumming wasn't just keeping rhythm, it was emotional, alive, and sometimes chaotic. Tony's riffs were structured and precise, but Bill pushed them into new territories with his explosive style. This balance between control and chaos gave Sabbath their unique sound. Offstage, the band members were young, wild, and often reckless. They pulled pranks, stayed up all night, and lived without limits. But sometimes, their fun went too far. One of the most infamous stories is the gold paint incident. During the recording of their album Volume 4, the band thought it would be funny to cover Bill in gold paint as a prank. What they didn't know was that metallic paint could block the skin's pores and cause poisoning. Bill collapsed and went into convulsions, and he had to be rushed to the hospital. Looking back, Tony admitted he felt terrible about it. He realized then that their lives, behind all the rock star myths, were fragile. They were not untouchable. They were human. Still, despite the chaos, Tony and Bill had a bond that couldn't be denied. They pushed each other musically, fought sometimes, laughed often, and created music that was raw and groundbreaking. But success brought new pressures. By the mid-1970s, Black Sabbath was touring constantly, facing media attention, and trying to keep up with the demand for new music. This lifestyle was hard on everyone, but it hit Bill especially hard. He began drinking heavily, and his unpredictable nature, once a strength, started to create problems in the studio and on stage. Tony, known for his perfectionism, struggled with Bill's impulsiveness. Arguments became more frequent, and what once made their partnership strong now became a source of tension. The late 1970s brought big changes. In 1979, Ozzy Osbourne was kicked out of the band because of his drug and alcohol issues. Replacing Ozzy with Ronnie James Dio gave the band a fresh start, but the strain inside the group didn't go away. Bill was battling personal demons and health problems. During the recording of Heaven and Hell in 1980, things finally broke down. Bill left the band, unable to handle the pressure anymore. For fans, it was devastating. His drumming had been such an important part of the Sabbath sound, and without him, the music felt different. Tony later explained, it was Bill who pulled the plug because he didn't like things the way they were. This wasn't about betrayal or ego, it was about a man reaching his breaking point. Even after he left, Bill's influence on Black Sabbath never disappeared. His drumming shaped the sound that defined heavy metal. His absence, though, left a hole that could never truly be filled. Over the years, the band's lineup changed, but the memory of the original chemistry stayed with fans. The story of Tony and Bill is a story of two men who started together as brothers in music, who shared unbelievable highs and crushing lows, and whose friendship was tested time and time again. And while they spent years apart, the bond they formed in those early days would never fully fade. As time went on, the personal struggles of both Tony Iommi and Bill Ward became more visible. Fame may look glamorous, but behind the stage lights were years of exhaustion, health problems, and broken relationships. Tony, despite his calm and steady image, carried heavy burdens. In 2012, he was diagnosed with lymphoma, a type of cancer. At first, fans feared the worst, but Tony surprised everyone by staying strong. Even while going through treatment, he insisted on playing with Black Sabbath during their reunion tour. To make it possible, the band scheduled shows around his treatment so he could fly back to the UK every 6 weeks for infusions. His dedication was inspiring, but it took a toll on his body. Later, Tony would admit that even after beating cancer, the effects of treatment left him feeling weak and tired. Bill Ward faced even more serious health issues. In 2013, he had stomach surgery that made it difficult for him to play drums the way he used to. He also struggled with heart disease, which sent him to the hospital in 2017. In 2019, he revealed he had neuropathy, a condition that affects the nerves and makes it hard to move. For someone whose life was built around drumming, this was heartbreaking. Bill admitted he wanted to play with Black Sabbath again, but his body wasn't strong enough. The combination of these health problems meant that his absence from reunions wasn't just about contracts, it was also about survival. But contracts did play a major role in one of the biggest disappointments for fans. In 2012, when the original members of Black Sabbath announced they would reunite for a world tour, the excitement was enormous. Fans everywhere dreamed of seeing Tony, Ozzy, Geezer, and Bill on stage together again. But then came the shocking news: Bill wouldn't be joining. He said the contract offered to him was unsignable. While he didn't reveal all the details, he suggested it was unfair and didn't treat him as an equal member. Fans were angry. Some blamed the band, saying they pushed Bill out. Others believed it was about business and health. Either way, it left a mark on the reunion. As one fan wrote online, "You can't call it a reunion without Bill." Tony tried to remain diplomatic in interviews, saying positive things about the tour and avoiding direct criticism. But the truth was clear: the relationship between him and Bill was still strained. They had decades of friendship and music between them, but also decades of arguments, mistrust, and pain. By 2015, Tony decided it was time to be more honest. In an interview, he said, "I want to bury the hatchet with Bill Ward." This was a big statement because it showed he didn't want to keep fighting. But at the same time, he admitted that Bill had been difficult to work with. Tony explained that Bill would sometimes change parts of songs during recording sessions, which could throw off the entire band and waste hours. Tony described Bill as too unpredictable. Still, even as he admitted these problems, Tony spoke with respect. He understood that Bill's unpredictability was also what gave Sabbath their special energy. Without it, the band would never have sounded the same. This honesty from Tony gave fans a new perspective. It wasn't about hatred, it was about two very different personalities trying to make magic together. Sometimes it worked beautifully, and sometimes it created conflict. For the first time, Tony allowed fans to see the human side of the band. Behind the myth of rock gods were real men, with real flaws, trying to balance friendship, fame, and creativity. The years of separation between Tony and Bill were painful, but they also made their story more powerful. Every time rumors of reconciliation appeared, fans grew hopeful. Every time talks broke down, they felt disappointment. The relationship between these two men became a story in itself, followed not just on stage but in interviews, magazines, and online discussions. Fans weren't just watching a band, they were emotionally invested in whether old friends could ever find peace. And then, after decades of tension, something amazing happened. In 2025, Black Sabbath announced their final concert. The location was perfect, Birmingham, the very city where it all started. The announcement alone sent shockwaves through the music world, but what really stunned fans was the news that Bill Ward would return for the show. After years of absence, health problems, contract disputes, and silence, the original lineup was finally back together, one last time. The atmosphere in Birmingham that night was electric. Fans from around the world gathered, knowing they were about to witness history. When Bill's drum kit was rolled onto the stage, the crowd erupted. For many, it wasn't just about hearing the music. It was about seeing forgiveness and closure with their own eyes. For Tony and Bill, this moment carried decades of memories, good and bad. They had started as friends, built a band that changed the world, fought through endless struggles, and now, here they were again, side by side. Tony later joked about Bill's return, comparing him to Gollum from Lord of the Rings. The humor lightened the mood, but behind the joke was deep respect. This wasn't just another show. It was the end of a story that had lasted more than 50 years. Every riff Tony played, every beat Bill hit, carried the weight of their history. Fans could feel it. This wasn't just music, it was healing. The concert was more than a farewell. It was proof that bonds built through music and brotherhood can survive even the hardest challenges. It showed that forgiveness is possible, even after years of silence and anger. And it gave fans the closure they had been waiting for. For Tony and Bill, it wasn't about contracts or fame anymore. It was about remembering why they started in the first place, the love of music and the bond of friendship. Looking back, their story is powerful because it shows the human side of legends. Tony Iommi and Bill Ward weren't perfect. They made mistakes, argued, and hurt each other. But they also created something that changed music forever. Their story is a reminder that behind every great band are human beings, with all their flaws and struggles. It's also a reminder that art often comes from tension, pain, and imperfection. Without their clashes, Black Sabbath wouldn't have been the same. In the end, Tony's honesty about Bill Ward gave fans what they had been searching for, a deeper understanding of what really happened. It wasn't just about music. It was about two men, navigating friendship, fame, and the passage of time. Their final reunion wasn't just a concert. It was a symbol of resilience, forgiveness, and the power of music to bring people together. One of the most fascinating parts of Tony Iommi and Bill Ward's story is how much their personalities shaped the very soul of Black Sabbath. Tony was always seen as the quiet, serious leader, the one who kept the music on track and held the group together when things got messy. Bill, on the other hand, was the wild card. He could be unpredictable, emotional, and even fragile at times, but he was also deeply creative. That mix of discipline from Tony and chaos from Bill gave Sabbath something no other band had. Many drummers could play heavy beats, but Bill had a special way of making the drums sound alive, almost like another voice in the song. Tony later admitted that sometimes he never knew what Bill was going to do, but that very unpredictability created moments of magic on stage. What's not often talked about is how much Bill looked up to Tony. In early interviews, Bill described Tony as the rock of the band, someone who never seemed to fall apart no matter what was happening. When Ozzy was spiraling, when Geezer was exhausted, when Bill himself was struggling with drinking, Tony was the one who kept writing riffs, kept pushing the band forward, and kept showing up to rehearsal. Bill often felt guilty that he couldn't match Tony's discipline. That guilt sometimes turned into anger, which is part of why they clashed. But underneath it, there was always respect. Tony was not just a bandmate to Bill, he was a brother figure, someone Bill admired even when they were fighting. Another unique detail is the role their families played in the later years. By the 2000s and 2010s, both men had families who worried about their health and the stress of touring. Bill's children, in particular, were very protective of him. They wanted him to be remembered as the great drummer he was, not as someone struggling on stage because of health problems. Some fans saw Bill's absence from reunions as betrayal, but to his family, it was an act of love. They didn't want him to push himself to the point of collapse. Tony, too, had family concerns. During his cancer treatments, his loved ones urged him to slow down, but he refused because he wanted to finish what he started with Sabbath. This shows how much both men sacrificed personally to keep the music alive, even when their bodies were telling them to stop. Financial disagreements also played a larger role than many fans realize. The unsignable contract that Bill mentioned wasn't just about money, it was also about control and respect. Bill felt that the deal offered to him made him look like a side player instead of a founding member. To him, that was humiliating after everything he had given to the band. Tony, however, saw it from a practical point of view. He was worried about Bill's health and whether he could keep up with the heavy schedule of touring. The contract, in Tony's mind, was protection for the band in case Bill couldn't perform. This difference in perspective is what caused the rift. Both men were telling the truth from their point of view, but they couldn't find common ground. One touching story comes from when Tony was battling cancer. Even though Bill was not part of the reunion, he quietly reached out to check on Tony. He didn't make a big public statement or use it for attention, he simply wanted to know if his old friend was okay. Tony later mentioned in passing that he appreciated the gesture. It shows that, despite the fights and contracts, there was still a bond that couldn't be broken. Moments like this remind us that behind the headlines and gossip are real friendships, filled with both pain and care. Fans also played a big role in keeping the hope alive. Throughout the 2010s, petitions and fan campaigns popped up online, begging the band to bring Bill back. Some fans even threatened to boycott the reunion shows without him. The passion of the audience showed just how important Bill was to the legacy of Sabbath. For many fans, he wasn't just the drummer, he was part of the soul of the band. Tony noticed this too. He once admitted that fan pressure made him reconsider how he talked about Bill in interviews. Instead of just focusing on the problems, he started making an effort to highlight Bill's contributions, because he knew how much the fans cared. One of the most emotional details about their final concert in Birmingham was how Tony and Bill behaved backstage. People who were there said the two men spent time together before the show, sitting quietly, reminiscing about the old days. There were no shouting matches, no drama, just two old friends sharing memories. Tony even showed Bill some of the riffs he had been working on privately, as if to say, "We could have done this together." Bill, for his part, thanked Tony for keeping Sabbath alive all those years. For a moment, it felt like they were back in 1968 again, just kids with a dream. Another detail worth noting is how Tony viewed Bill's drumming later in life. In one interview, Tony said that no matter who replaced Bill over the years, whether it was Vinny Appice, Cozy Powell, or others, nobody could quite capture the same swing and soul that Bill had. He admitted that technically, some drummers were tighter, but none had Bill's feel. That's a huge compliment coming from Tony, who is known for being demanding about rhythm and timing. It showed that deep down, Tony always knew Bill was irreplaceable. The final show in Birmingham wasn't just emotional for the band, it was emotional for the fans too. Many of them had followed Sabbath since the 1970s, and to see the original lineup one last time felt like closing a chapter in their own lives. People cried during the performance, not just because it was the end of Sabbath, but because it was proof that old wounds could heal. For decades, fans had seen headlines about feuds and fights, but in that moment, they saw forgiveness. That kind of closure is rare in rock history. Looking at their story as a whole, Tony and Bill's relationship is almost like a mirror of Black Sabbath itself. It started with fire, excitement, and youth. It went through chaos, pain, and near collapse. And in the end, it found peace, not through perfection, but through acceptance. Tony's decision to finally speak openly about Bill Ward gave fans clarity. It wasn't about blaming or making excuses, it was about telling the truth, even when the truth was messy. That honesty is why people still care about this story today. In the end, the lesson from Tony and Bill's journey is simple but powerful. Friendship and art are not always easy, but they are worth fighting for. The music they made will last forever, but what truly touches people is the humanity behind it. Their struggles make the songs feel even more real, because fans can see themselves in the imperfections. Just like Tony and Bill, we all make mistakes, we all clash with people we love, and we all hope for forgiveness at the end of the day. And maybe that's why their story continues to inspire people long after the final notes of Black Sabbath's farewell concert have faded into history. So, what do you think about their relationship? Did you know about their struggles before Tony spoke out? And do you believe their final show truly brought them peace? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and until next time.